you make. And to me, it seems like that's almost assuredly what's going to happen. But it's not so much a bad thing. It's fairly impossible to get the entire community in the world to like say, hey, we're all gonna sing Kumbaya and build all these open source components, and we're all gonna agree to use. That seems like a bad thing anyway, because then you end up with one thing that's monolithic anyway, or at least one system anyway. So what we do see though is like you got the cloud foundries out there. You got I don't know, maybe OpenShift, or you got all these different companies. Yeah, I'm sure Google and Amazon and Microsoft will all have theirs, or Spring. Will continue investing in whatever they're doing. And there's all these other concepts out there that are all competing against each other, and each one of those should evolve into a big microservices framework. Is what I think will happen, and then you're going to basically bet the farm on one of those, or try a couple of them out, maybe even use a couple of them. But they should evolve into these really healthy ecosystems in and of themselves, which probably will take a lot of investment to get going, but once you do, you get the benefit of it. Kind of like Spring, really. I mean, that kind of did it in the Java world, right? It's this big Java framework that you kind of invest in and then get the benefit out of it over time, right? I'm guessing that's kind of how this kind of goes for the enterprise. For the big Netflixes of the world, they can do whatever they want, but for the enterprise, I think you have to kind of go all in on something at some point.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I do think that like whenever there's a new concept, right, whether it was SOA, cloud, microservices, now, I mean, vendors are going to jump in, right, and they're going to want to own it. They want to, they want to be the microservices vendor for a given customer. Because you could say that's what happened with SOA, right? Commercialization, heavyweight stuff that's painful to use. But I would like to. I kind of would like to preserve sort of the vision of microservices as being apps, as being an architecture in which you can mix and match and experiment, right? Because I do think that it doesn't matter, what technology you pick, right? Sooner or later, that technology is going to be old and it's going to suck, and no one's going to want to work on it, right? And so if you built your entire system out of it, your entire system will suck.
So mixing and matching, but I do imagine that I would imagine that would happen. It's just that I imagine that we'll get consolidation over time of the frameworks they would use to build and run the microservices. So you might at some point have a larger platform, even though you're using services on top of it.
I would strive to obviously, on the one hand, you obviously want to leverage and whatever gets you there quicker. Like, so okay, I'm using Spring Boot, and for free I get health monitoring and a whole bunch of frameworky stuff,
right?
And there's value there. But I still would really want to be in a position where if I wanted to go program in Haskell, right, because I don't know why. Actually, it's a really interesting language. But it would be great if the overhead to trying that was minimal in some way.
Well, it sounds like a worthy endeavor to do that.
Yeah, because I really do think that this notion that you can readily adopt and embrace new technologies is actually really important, right?
Yeah.
Because the alternative is systems that will eventually suck.
Right. There's the battle.
There are frameworks like Dropwizard, like Spring Boot, that are coming up that kind of resemble a microservice framework.
Yeah, and certainly Spring Boot is being pushed quite heavily by the Spring guys as a microservice thing, and I'm not even going to argue with them, because I think it really is a good fit. But
then even then, you do have lock-in, like with Dropwizard. They pick a version of Jetty or Jersey, let's say, to go with, and then you won't get an update of that Jersey version until they decide that they're going to update it, unless you want to go and do all this integration internally and fix everything, right? So if you go with the framework, you're gonna have to, you know, do whatever comes with it.
Yeah, but there's lock-in and then there's lock-in, you know, if you consider the monolith, the lock-in is 100,000, I mean, a million lines of code. If you consider Spring Boot changing to something else, I mean, I don't know, is it 100 lines, is it 1,000 lines, I don't know, but it's not a million.
Yes.
So which microservices framework or platform will be the most open and mature at the same time? Like right now, if you had to make a suggestion or point out one that you've seen take a leap forward that's open and I mean really open, you know.
So actually, to almost answer a comment on that question, you mentioned that you use Docker in your app. I don't know what your app does, but you also mentioned, I think, that you don't use etcd and fleet control. I was curious why. Did you use some other, like Zookeeper or whatever it was?
Well, I haven't finalized what I'm gonna do in that area. Like, as in, well, I suppose there's sort of a bunch of different things, but like an automated provisioning of the containers, right? And I guess there's choices there, fleet or, well, I think there's a gazillion choices, but there could be fleet, but then there's also Mesos and Marathon that look interesting. And then, you know, Zookeeper versus etc.d, and I mean that whole world. I mean, it's kind of like the Zookeeper Mesos is sort of the older stuff that's been independent of Docker, and then there's a whole bunch of Docker specific things, and there's lots to choose from, and none of them have
That might be
grabbed me
dying.
as being.
No, it's not.
That's weird. None of them have grabbed me as being as being the solution.
It seems that CoreOS with Docker and Fleet etcd could be one of the winners going forward.
Yeah, I mean it looks interesting.
I think we should
Can I
let
just
you summarize maybe
Dave,
one question
can I
and then make your final words.
One question. Going back to actually previous comment about lock-in and how we avoid it. So there is on one side of the spectrum, there is this huge monolithic app. There is this microservices, and going back to the question, why microservices, why not just call it SOA? Would it be actually fair to, as a one way to look at this, with microservices you are really trying to have very tight integration between independent pieces. So you have decoupling, but they still have to be tightly orchestrated, whether you are using event store, event sourcing, etc. And then you can actually have even more decoupled pieces that you can really use whatever technology, because these are completely different services.
I mean, I don't know if the goal. I mean, I don't think there's an explicit goal of having tightly coupled things. I kind of still view them as somewhat loosely coupled.
I mean, they are loosely coupled, they are tighter coupled than like big services that you don't really care what technology they are. You just care about, I need to be able to communicate with them, and that's it.
Yeah, but in this architecture that I described, I mean, you don't really care what the individual bits are. They're just like playing in this event-driven architecture. So, but still technology neutral.
Okay, so then there is no lock-in, because there was a question, how do you avoid lock-in?
Yeah, well, it's sort of, I mean, I guess the lock-in is just from the fact that, well, you need to build in order for a service to play in this in your system, it needs to have monitoring, it needs to have this, it needs to have, there's a whole bunch of cross-cutting concerns. And it's like if you invest the effort in doing it in Java, then it's duplication to redo the same thing in JavaScript or Haskell or whatever, or Python or whatever language we're using. And so, the cost of being polyglot is not free. But I just, as I said, I think one should strive to just use mix and match and experiment.
Do you have good overview papers on your website about microservices? Or can you make a recommendation on that?
I wrote one for InfoQ.
Okay.
There was an introduction to microservices. and then that actually got bundled as part of an EMAG on microservices, and there was a bunch of good stuff on that.
You know, I think I did a search on microservices frameworks, and that one came up pretty high, I think. Well, okay, great. We really did keep you a lot.
Oh, one thing,
longer.
go to microservices.io.
There you go.
Okay,
That will point you in a whole bunch of different directions.
thank you.
All right, let's thank Chris. All right, everyone.